You know, over the last few months, news out of the U.S. has constantly dominated the headlines. It's like a day doesn't go by without some news of the U.S. President Donald Trump holding on as the biggest story of the day. Whether it's a travel ban or a wall or some unpopular agenda he's trying to push through Congress, he's always at the tip top of the news mountain. Until this week, someone has finally pushed his way to the top and taken the headlines away from Donald Trump. And that person is Donald Trump Jr. This week, Donnie Trump has taken over the headlines with a story that, very much like his father, changes from hour to hour as many people are saying, "What the heck?" Or, "You can put your own there." Anyway, some are saying if this were a movie, everyone would criticize it because it's just so unbelievable. Now, we have talked here on the Jam many times about the Trump campaign and its ties to Russia. There's clear-cut evidence that the Russian government interfered in the U.S. election to get Donald Trump elected as the President of the United States. This we now know. But one of the things that has eluded investigators is, did the Trump campaign help the Russians with this interference? Now, there has been tons of circumstantial stuff. Jared Kushner, the son-in-law of the president, said on his security clearance that no, he never met any Russian government officials during, before, or after the campaign. And he had to go back and change that answer to yes on 3 different occasions. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, in his confirmation hearing, said that he had never met with any Russians and that no one from the Trump campaign ever colluded with Russia. Of course, that testimony has all turned out to be false. Paul Manafort, the campaign manager for the Trump team, seems to have gotten $10 million from a buddy of Vladimir Putin for helping sway the U.S. governmental policies in Russia's favor. And then there was Michael Flynn, who had been fired about lying about his involvement with Russia and money he was paid from them, etc., etc. There's been a huge mountains of evidence, however, not the ironclad proof that the Trump team worked with Russians to actually cheat in the election, that they assisted Russia in hacking into the DNC and releasing damaging information on Hillary Clinton. But then this week happened. It's almost the smoking gun that so many have been waiting to find. The key word is almost. It all started back on June 3rd, 2016, at the height of the presidential race, when a music publicist named Rob Goldstone sent an email to Donald Trump Jr. Rob Goldstone, whose nickname is Fred Flintstone, is the manager of a Russian pop singer named Emin Algalarov, whose billionaire father, Aras, is a Moscow property tycoon with close links to Vladimir Putin, and who was the sponsor of the Miss Universe competition, who was owned by Donald Trump. It's Aras that asked Goldstone to set up the meeting between Trump Jr. and a Russian lawyer named Natalia Veselnitskaya. Now, this guy, Rob Goldstone, says on his website that he has represented Cyndi Lauper, Julio Iglesias, and YouTube, and once accompanied Bob Geldof to Ethiopia. However, recent statements from all these people say that they have not worked with this man. The only confirmed act seems to be Emin Algalarov, who had a music video in which Donald Trump himself was in it. Also, Rob Goldstone is well known for dressing up in strange outfits such as those of a pirate and a schoolgirl, and posing in selfies that he posts on his Facebook page. So anyway, at the height of the presidential race last year, Emin, the singer, asked his manager Goldstone to contact someone he knew in the Trump group, that they had some really good damaging dirt on Hillary Clinton. So Goldstone wrote an email to Don Jr. and said that a Russian attorney would be flying in from Moscow with evidence that would incriminate Clinton and would be very useful to his father. He also said it was obviously high-level and sensitive information and is part of Russia and its government support for Donald Trump. Now, here's where Donald Trump Jr. had a choice to either turn all this over to the FBI or try and help the Russians. He replied to the email saying, "I love it," and decided to set up a meeting. So Trump Jr. forwarded the email to his buddies Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort and invited them to the meeting. Now, here's the thing. This past week, recently, the New York Times found out about this meeting. And they were going to publish the story, and they told the people of the Trump campaign, "We're going to publish this. Do you have any comment?" The story was big, but it would have been bigger if they only had the original email. They knew the email existed, but they didn't have the original. However, on the day they were going to put out the story, Donald Trump Jr. decided to tweet out the email. This was a big shock to many. Why on earth would he do something like this? Why send out the emails? What lawyer in his right mind would ever allow his client to do what seems like the exact opposite of what you should do? I mean, the New York Times story was all just speculation, so why give them the actual evidence? So far, no one had any actual evidence tying the secret and confidential collusion info Russia was saying about Clinton. But in the first email in the series of emails, on the subject line of the email, it actually said, "Russia, Clinton, private and confidential." The people that seemed to be hurt most by this were the guys from the New York Times. Let me read a tweet from one of the New York Times reporters. He writes, "I worked on this story for a year, and then he just tweeted it out. Like, I spent hours and days and weeks and months, and his son just hit tweet. I tracked down sources, followed so many dead leads, labored over this, and then he just, tweeted out the proof. Like, so many people out there were trying to track this down, and it just got delivered on a tweet. What the hell?" So anyway, in a statement, Don Jr. said, "In order to be totally transparent, I'm releasing the entire email chain of my emails." The first email on June 3rd, 2016 was from Rob, that's the Goldstone guy, who was relating a request from Emin, that's the pop singer. Don Jr. said, "The information they suggested they had about Hillary Clinton, I thought was just political opposition research." Which is fine. You can do political opposition research, except when it's coming from a foreign national, which is against the law in the US. Now, Don Jr. went on the Fox network and said that maybe this wasn't such a good idea to release the emails, and he has since hired a lawyer. By the way, his new lawyer's name is Alan Furterfoss. who was once a lawyer for the mob and a Juilliard-trained trombonist. I say it again, you just can't make this stuff up. So, the Trump team said over and over that there was no collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian government, which was true until this week. Now, Don Jr.'s explanation of this is that it's all a lot to do about nothing. He said they came to the meeting hoping to get some real dirt on Hillary. However, the info was not very good, and it turned into a meeting about adopting Russian children. He said once they realized that she didn't have the mountain of dirt that they were hoping for, they just wanted to end the meeting. But the lawyer wanted to bring up the adoption thing, which the Russian government won't allow the U.S. to adopt babies because of the sanctions that they have in place. So many officials are saying, you may not have gotten what you wanted, but you know, to Donald Trump Jr., there's still a problem. It's like if you go to the bank with guns to rob it, but then when you open the safe, there's no money in it. You're still in trouble for robbing the bank, though. So Don Jr. gave yet another explanation, saying that his friend from the Miss Universe pageant had some damaging information about Hillary Clinton, but he never knew the name of the person he was going to meet. He said, I was not told her name. He said, I invited Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort to the meeting. However, I didn't tell them what the meeting was about. So the problem with that story is that it all happened at the height of the presidential campaign. And he invited Jared and Paul, the two most important people in the campaign. And he wanted them to come down to a meeting with someone he didn't know about something he wasn't going to tell them. Also later, he seems to have forwarded them the email, which was a complete explanation of what the meeting was about, which was set for June 7th. Also he said he never told his father about the meeting. However, on the same day that Donald Trump won the New Jersey primary, it pretty much looked like he was going to be the Republican nominee to run against Clinton. He gave a speech saying he had some real evidence on Hillary Clinton and how crooked she was and how he was going to tell us about her private hedge fund and how the Russians gave money to the Clintons for a favorable treatment in return. All this was coming in just a few days. Then on June 9th, Trump's son met with the Russian attorney, but apparently didn't have the solid information about Clinton that they so desperately were hoping for. 4 days later, everyone was waiting for the big revelation that Trump had promised, showing how Hillary Clinton was taking money from corrupt governments. But that didn't happen. Instead, he claimed he would have to postpone his Clinton shaming speech later because of the mass shooting at a nightclub in Florida, and that he would have to deliver the dirt on Clinton at another time. Trump's lawyers wouldn't comment on the sequence of events. However, a staffer said, "Oh, this is all just a big coincidence." Now, the Trump people are pointing out that this Russian lawyer with ties to the Kremlin would not have even been here had it not been for the Obama administration granting her a visa. Well, it turns out she was originally denied a visa, however, was given a special parole visa because of the case that she was working on at that time. The type of visa she was given is mostly used for humanitarian reasons. Now, it turns out that this lawyer was working for a Cyprus-based real estate holdings company run by a guy who is the son of one of Vladimir Putin's closest advisors. she was given unlimited resources by the Kremlin-connected group to run a campaign to get the Maginski Act repealed. Now, we actually have spoken about the Maginski Act here on the Jam before. It's the thing that enacts sanctions on certain Russian officials as a punishment for human rights violations, such as, killing people. Now, Donald Trump himself put an interesting spin on this whole thing this past week when he said that in reality, Putin really wanted Hillary Clinton to win the election. He said that this week in an interview that if Hillary had won the election, our military would have been decimated. Our energy would be much more expensive. That's what Putin doesn't like about me. That's why I say, why would he want me? Because from day one, I wanted a strong military. He doesn't want to see that. And from day one, I want fracking and everything else that gets energy prices low and to create tremendous energy. We're going to be self-supporting. We're going to be exporting energy. He doesn't want that. He would like Hillary, where she wants to have windmills. He would much rather have that because then energy prices will go up. And Russia, as you know, relies very much on energy. So there are many things that I do that are the exact opposite of what he would want. So when I keep hearing that he would rather have Trump, I think probably not. And that's the end of the quote from Donald Trump. Now, that statement of Donald Trump has a lot of political people saying, OMG, and you have got to be kidding me. Because that is one heck of a stretch. Donald Trump was at the G20 summit, which we talked about last week here on the show. But the funny story that kind of came out of that was that the Trump people didn't really prepare him for anything. No agenda or anything. In fact, they tried to get him a hotel room the day before, but it was too late and all the rooms were already booked up. Which is really ironically funny, seeing as Donald Trump is known for his hotels. So the German government was very nice, and they let him stay in one of their Senate guest houses. Kind of a B&B for world leaders that forget to book their hotel rooms. So Trump did not do so well at the G20. He actually mistakenly mixed up the Prime Minister of Singapore for the President of Indonesia. I guess you could say they kind of look the same, but of course that wasn't the biggest news item. The G20 summit ended up being the G19+1 summit, saying that Trump was on the opposite sides of world leaders and that he was pretty much left alone most of the time. Although afterwards Trump claimed that he got along fine with all the world leaders at the summit and that everyone likes him. But of course, the pinnacle of the summit was when Trump met with his super buddy, Vladimir Putin. The big question was, is Putin going to admit to Trump that Russia interfered with the election in which the U.S. knows he did, and Putin knows the U.S. knows he did? Trump asked Putin, did you interfere with the U.S. election? To which Putin said, no. Then Trump said, he asked Putin one more time, did you interfere in the election? To which Putin said, no. So Trump said, see, I asked him twice, and he said no. So I guess we can move on now. At which point, Trump and Putin decided to create a cybersecurity unit to help combat people from interfering in elections so that a foreign government can help elect a leader that they would then control. To which several U.S. government officials and many news pundits and many U.S. citizens replied, are you freaking kidding me? Trump later said, oh, don't worry, this probably won't happen. But it seems no matter what he says, the Russian connections with his people just won't go away. Trump was in Paris this week to meet with President Macron. Now, during the G20, the French president said the whole world knew it was a mistake for the U.S. to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, and tensions ran high when the French and the U.S. officials clashed over an attempt of the Trump team to insert a clause in the final statement to the media. At one point, talks broke down for 2 hours while the U.S. and France argued over the wording of the climate change section. But the highlights reported from Trump's big trip to Paris seem to be focused on what happened at the beginning of the trip when his wife Melania, Macron, and Macron's wife were all standing together. Trump seemed to have kind of been hitting on Macron's wife, Bridget. I mean, maybe he didn't, but at one point he complimented her on her nice shape. Then standing back and taking a long look, and then saying her body was beautiful, sort of implying that for an old woman, you are looking hot. He did this in front of his own wife and the president of France, giving much material for the late night comedy shows. Anyway, in his press conference just the other day, in which Trump was, of course, asked about his son's meeting with a Russian lawyer and about getting dirt on Clinton, to which Trump responded that Donald Trump Jr. was a good boy and that anyone would have taken that meeting, and this is much to do about nothing. And also he chimed in that the attorney general from the Obama administration are the ones that gave the Russian lawyer her visa. Trump had stated before that Paris was a complete mess and was a very dangerous place, that Germany and Paris were infected with terrorism. A recent poll shows that around 14% of French people have a favorable view of Trump. But now Trump says that he and Macron are good friends, and that now France has a great president. He said he thinks Paris is a peaceful and beautiful place now. Then he said to Macron, "You better do a good job or you're going to make me look bad." And everyone sort of, kind of uncomfortably chuckled a little. So now Trump heads back to the U.S. But unfortunately, none of what he discussed diplomatically with Macron is in the news. Only the ever-changing stories about his son, Donald Trump Jr. Don Jr. had an interview on Fox Network in which he said they had disclosed everything about the Russian meeting and that every detail was now on the table, and that this meeting between he, Kushner, Manafort, and the Russian lawyer was really no big deal. However, since Friday, it turns out that there was a lot of details that were left out. Don Jr. claimed there were 4 people in the meeting. Well, now it turns out that there were actually 8 people in the meeting. There was also a Russian-American lobbyist, and then that guy Rob Goldstone, and 2 other people, including a translator and a representative of the Russian family with close ties to Putin, who had asked Goldstone to set up the meeting in the first place. So now, everyone is getting more lawyers. So far, Trump has spent almost $700,000 on legal consulting between April and June, as they kept adding to the stable of lawyers. Now Don Jr. has that lawyer trombonist to help him not do things like release the evidence of collusion with the Russian government. But this leads up to yet another crazy story that happened this week, and that is of Trump's lead attorney, Mark Kasowitz. He's the same guy that represented Donald Trump in the fraud case about Trump University, in which students sued the so-called school. Trump lost that case and had to pay, I think, $25 million Also, he's the same guy that gave the somewhat bizarre press conference about the fired FBI director, Comey. And this week, the Times reported that President Trump was growing more and more disillusioned by his strategy, and Kazowitz, in turn, had become deeply frustrated by the president. Anyway, he is representing Donald Trump in the Russia scandal. However, he has stated that he will not attempt to get a security clearance so that, he can sit in on meetings about the Russian collusion. This, of course, seems a bit odd until you start to look at his background and see that the reason that he probably doesn't want to apply for a security clearance is that, he can't get it because of his background. So last week, this random guy wrote an email to Trump's lawyer saying that he should resign his position as Trump's legal consultant in the Russia matter. He said, "Your name may turn out to be a disparaging historical footnote to the presidency of Donald Trump." He was kind of saying, why are you in this position when you can't even get a security clearance? I mean, people say stuff like this all the time. These days, everyone has a comment on every subject. Well, Trump's lawyer did something that you wouldn't think that someone at his level would do. He responded. And his response was, F you. So maybe he was mad or just had a bad day, but he just had to let it out. But then he didn't stop there. A few minutes later, he wrote another email. "How dare you send me an email like that? I'm on you now. You are effing with me. Let's see who you are. Watch your back." Then a word that starts with B and rhymes with itch. So you would think that's enough. He let out some steam, said a few cuss words, but it wasn't. He sent another email. "Call me. Don't be afraid, you piece of..." Something starts with S. Then yet another email. "Stand up. If you don't call me, you're just afraid." Then another email. This one now was getting crazy. "I'm Jewish. I presume you are too. Stop being afraid. Call me or give me your number and I will call you. I already know where you live. I'm on you. You might as well call me. You will see, I promise, bro." So after this barrage of emails, the man wrote back. He said, "Thank you for your kind reply, and I will get in touch with you as appropriate." Then the man sent everything that the lawyer sent to him to the FBI. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but it can almost be interpreted as a threat on the man's life, especially when Trump's lawyer was coming to his house to get him, bro. Well, on Thursday, through a spokesman, Trump's lawyer said, "The person sending that email is entitled to his opinion, and I should not have responded in that inappropriate manner. I intend to send him an email stating just that. This is one of those times where one wishes he could reverse the clock, but of course, I can't." So, what a week of emails. Everyone just needs this week to send them. First, Donald Trump Jr., after saying there was never any collusion with any Russians, proceeded to send out a whole bunch of emails which basically said, "We met with and colluded with Russians who are tied to the Kremlin." Jared Kushner, who is a top advisor to the president and a high security clearance, had to amend his clearance saying, "Oh yeah, I forgot. I actually did meet with the Russians." He didn't meet them for tea or crumpets, but with the idea that there would be secret information to damage the Hillary Clinton campaign. Then Donald Trump Jr. comes on TV and says he has told everything there is to tell about the meeting, and also his father didn't know about it. And the very next day, all that turned out to be false. Meanwhile, Trump is talking about setting a cybersecurity program with the guy that is under investigation for being behind the biggest act of cyber terrorism in history. and making comments on the French president's wife's hot bod as his own lawyer goes nuts. I hear people saying, one day this is going to make a great movie. Really? I think it would just be too unbelievable. You're listening to the World News Jam here on DZRJ Radio, the voice of the Philippines. I'm Eric LeCain. We are talking about interesting stories from around the world. We're going to take a quick commercial break, so stay tuned.